Hello and welcome to the Teaching Together podcast, where we celebrate and share the glows and grows of teacher life. I'm Sierra.
And I'm Grace. Every week to kick off the podcast, we like to share the glows, the grows, maybe both, of our teaching weeks. So Sierra, do you have a glow or a grow?
I have a glow for today. I have just finished marking 3 classes worth of Year 8 projects. So that was a long slog. And every time a student asked me, Miss, when are we going to get our marks back? I said, yours is going to the bottom of my pile, which is so funny because they all get their marks back at the same time anyway. And I'm not sure that they realised that. The look of terror on their face was like, oh my goodness, I've just slowed the process down. Anyway. It was good to get through that. And I actually found it really helpful. I used the Pomodoro timer last week to help me just persist with getting marking done, because when you're marking like 75 of the same thing, it gets a bit monotonous. So I was using that to help me just consistently push through. And so that was a great achievement. And then what I was even more excited about today was I did some whole class feedback, and then I also used my Glows and Grow stamp on their marking rubrics. So they had to look at what I guess I had written with that feedback stamp and then write a reflection before I gave them their numerical mark. The thing is that you can kind of figure out what the mark is based on the things that I've circled on the rubric. So they sort of get an idea roughly of where they're sitting. But I really am trying to push them to engage with the feedback before they look at the number. There's actually heaps of research to say that students who receive feedback only perform better in subsequent tasks than students who receive feedback and marks, or even students who receive just marks only. So I'm not allowed to withhold marks from my kids. I have to give them their marks back, but they are slowly starting to see that they actually get more out of it when they engage with the feedback, and they're less desperate to know the number. So that's a big glow for me, because that's been like a work in progress and something that I'm continuing to work on. And we're looking at how we might, encourage other teachers to do a similar sort of process, so that as a school, we're working on prioritizing the process of learning, not the end product.
Exactly. Yeah.
So anyway, that's my glow.
Love it.
What about you?
I'm going to start with my grow for this week, which is essentially just figuring out how to manage a class of talkative 5-year-olds. And I know this is not a problem that is relegated specifically to kindergarten, but I've just got a whole class of kids, not just even 1 or 2, just a whole class of kids who are constantly interrupting and just making absolutely no effort to listen at all. Like, I'm in the middle of a sentence directed at you. I am looking you in the eyes, and they just look away and try to ignore me. And it's doing my head in. It's very frustrating. I know that lots of teachers will experience this, and it's nothing new. And actually, one of the middle school teachers was like, I hate to tell you, but it doesn't get better. So I definitely am preaching to the choir here. It's just really annoying, and I am still trying to figure out the best way to approach that. So that's definitely an area of growth. But my glow for this week is it really just made my whole week. We use the Seesaw platform, which it's kind of like Facebook, but for your class. And I got this beautiful message from a parent that just said, our daughter loves being in your class. Thank you for taking care of our daughter. And I almost cried when I read it in the middle of a staff meeting. I was just like, this is so beautiful. This is why I'm a teacher. That was really affirming, and it was really reassuring that I'm actually doing an okay job. And I took a picture of it. I immediately sent it to Sierra. I have it there so I can look at it and go, no, I'm actually making a difference in these little people's lives. And their parents are also I'm taking care of their children. It just kind of also reinforced the importance of being a teacher. I'm taking care of the most precious person in someone's life. So the glow and the grow, they kind of work together this week actually, but it was so heartwarming to hear that or read that from that parent. Today's episode is a sequel, if you will, to last fortnight's episode. We unpacked a whole range of helpful time management and productivity tools to support our busy teacher schedule. So if you are looking for some time management strategies, please go and listen to that episode. If you did catch it, you may have noticed that we didn't get into one of everyone's favorite things, email.
We decided that email really deserved a whole episode of its own. There is a lot to say, think, and consider around emails and how they can both help and hinder us in our work and productivity. I think there's heaps of thoughts and opinions around emails and how it should be best used in the workplace. There are two sides to this coin. We want to give it due diligence by sharing some of our experiences and approaches to managing this inevitable part of the digital age that we live and work in.
As a first-year teacher, this is something that I'm already working really hard to set clear boundaries in, which we will get into in the body of the episode. But first, it's time for a cup of tea.
Well, I had the pleasure of being able to enjoy several teas today, but I am rounding it out with Sleep Tight by T2. I think this is actually one that you gave me, Grace, because you're not a big fan of this one.
No, yeah, I remember you came over to my house the first time we tried to record some episodes that never made it because they were terrible. But yeah, I have a bunch of loose leaf like packets and I said, Sierra, will you have these? And she was like, sure. And so I got rid of all of them.
Because I think I'd just been to a hotel and they had the Sleep Tight T2 in their little kitchenette thing and I actually really liked it. So that's what I'm enjoying to wind down this afternoon.
Love it. And I am enjoying another T2 tea. We're not sponsored by T2. Love to be, if you know someone. Let them know. But I am drinking Blue Mountain, which is kind of an extra campier version of Earl Grey. It's just a little bit more floral. It's fantastic. Highly recommend.
Well, I came across a post on Instagram this week, which read, "Please stop telling teachers to take a break or practice self-care when they literally get a new email or two every day with another thing they need to take care of, on top of our basic job of teaching." I think I was a little bit stunned by this, partly because I had literally just posted a reel about taking time out to care for yourself. I understand that emails can be really overwhelming, and they come in a steady and regular flow. And I don't necessarily think that that's the best way to communicate within our school settings. I think that we're kind of holding on to email because that was the better way of communicating when it first came out, but there's so many other ways that we can communicate. And we're going to talk a bit more about that later that might be more efficient and more effective and less draining for people. But I just don't think that we can boil our jobs down to what the writer of this post called the basic job of teaching. I don't know that we can limit our role to what is just happening face-to-face in the classroom. I think there is so much more to it than that. I know that teachers are becoming concerned with kind of the increasing administrative load that seems to be growing and the expectations on teachers and all the different things we have to do and be across. And I know that that presents challenges and that some of it seems less relevant and less necessary than others. But teaching is not just face-to-face. And I think lots of people know that teachers sometimes have to put on an act and put on a show for their class. And so if I think about it like preparing for a performance, there's a lot of work and preparation and planning and organization and teams and collaborating that is happening in the background in the lead up to a performance. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just concerned that I guess that some people think that the administrative side of teaching is not part of teaching.
I do agree with you, Sierra. In that teaching is full on. And I would even dare to say that if you are a teacher, you have committed to a full-on job. It is a profession and it is a lot more demanding than a lot of other full-time jobs because you're dealing with people. And that's what I love about teaching, is that it is so full on because it's something that matters. Like it's a valuable profession. And because of that, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And I have to agree that being in the classroom, being quote unquote like on class, being on class is half of it, maybe even less than half, because it's the end result of all this planning that goes in. However, as free-thinking, autonomous adults, we also have the responsibility, as well as the right, to set and enforce boundaries. And we're also going to talk about some boundaries that you can set in your professional life to protect your personal life. But in saying that, I just want to shout out my amazing grade leader, who I have spoken about before, but she's fantastic. She's been teaching kindergarten for 20 years, and she also lived overseas and did some teaching there. But she has explicitly stated to me on more than one occasion, Grace, if I send you an email at 7 o'clock at night, or if I send you an email on the weekend, please do not respond. Like, I'm allowed to be working, but you're not, kind of thing. And she said it helps her kind of tick that off her to-do list if she sent it. I should probably introduce her to Schedule Send, because in all seriousness, she probably doesn't know it exists. And she doesn't expect me to be responding. And workplace culture and expectations can definitely play a part. However, it's important that if you don't have someone setting those boundaries for you, and that's an area that you're really struggling with, you need to take it onto yourself and set those boundaries. And I think Sarah and I are both in agreement with this.
Yeah.
I hate hearing self-care because I am bad at it. And I literally last week got to the point I neglected myself so much that I had to take a sick day because my body was like, Grace, you need to stop. And I didn't realize until I was throwing up at 3 a.m. and was like, oh, I think I need to change some things. I was having a conversation with my grade leader, and she was saying, you know, you need to like book some time in to your calendar to do something fun. And then I thought, oh, actually, I don't have to hate self-care just because I'm quote unquote bad at it. It involves doing something you enjoy. And I know that lots of us professionals like to make ourselves feel guilty for doing anything that is quote unquote fun because it feels like a quote unquote waste of time. But if I decide that theoretically I wanted to go to a secondhand bookstore and then maybe have coffee with my sister and then maybe not do any work that day, everyone will be better for it. The secondhand book industry will be better for it. My sister will be better for it because she's been blessed with my company. I will be better for it because I'll be blessed with my sister's company. And my students will be better for it because I will be present 5 days a week instead of having to have every second Friday off because that's just when I happen to fall ill.
I think sometimes this notion of self-care, if you're not the type of person who's into pampering yourself, I think self-care can seem like a really strange concept.
Yeah.
And that's not really my vibe either, but it might just be I'm actually going to sit and have my coffee outside in the sun away from the computer. Working time for yourself into the school day to re-energize you for the next few hours can be helpful, but it might be for you, it might be that going for a run or going to the gym is like what you love doing and that really energizes you. And I know that there are people out there.
I know, right?
We aren't them. But there are people out there who really love that and that's how they unwind and they feel energized. And, you know, for me, it might be that I get to sit and sew for a few hours because that's like my creative outlet and that's how I'm caring for myself and making sure I'm giving myself space from my work and things like that. Self-care doesn't have to be self-pampering, I think, but it is important to create time for ourselves, for our families, for other parts of our life. And I just don't think that we can blame our emails for having no time in our lives.
You are not a bad teacher if you aren't thinking about teaching 24/7.
Yeah.
Take time for yourself and do something fun.
It's so interesting. Monash University conducted some research into how teachers perceive their work. Emails did come up a few times both in positive and negative ways. So one of the first things that was mentioned was about the validation and the appreciation that comes from a positive email from a parent or from a student. I think we know that the occasional thank you here or there doesn't really counter the difficulties and challenges that we might face at school and in the classroom, but the times that we do get positive feedback and thank yous are just so special and they go such a long way. And I always remember whenever I get, a nice email from a parent, it's like, who can I tell about this? Because I'm just so excited that someone appreciates me.
Yes.
And it's just so lovely. And I think sometimes, parents don't know the positive impact that they're having when they do that. However, the same can be true for emails in an opposite sense, where parents can unfortunately use emails from time to time in a more negative way. And I guess because there's that digital distance between the person speaking and you receiving the email, they can feel, I guess, maybe a little bit safer to say things that they wouldn't feel confident saying to your face or in a meeting. The study also asked for teacher feedback on how they could make the workload of teaching more manageable. And a key finding was that while emails did form part of the administrative burden for teachers, another suggestion was that less meetings would be better to support teachers to get through their workload. And so with this, I have to agree, but I just think it's funny because so many times you hear the phrase like that meeting could have been an email. And so if we want to reduce the number of meetings that we have, I guess we have to be prepared to receive the information in a written form instead.
Yes.
And so you can't really complain about receiving emails in lieu of meetings if you're going to be looking at reducing workload by reducing meetings. My previous school that I worked at had lots of meetings. I worked across 2 faculties, so I would have 2 faculty meetings and a secondary meeting most weeks.
That's so many meetings.
And now the school that I work at, we have a morning meeting every morning, which is just 10 minutes before the start of the school day, some key announcements and devotions and things like that. Really, very, very rarely do I attend a face-to-face meeting. Maybe once or twice a term, they'll do a 7 to 12 or a K to 12 meeting, and they are typically short. So typically for the 7 to 12 meetings, it'll be like, hey, everyone, we're going to meet for 15 minutes all together, and then you can break off into your faculty groups if you've got more things to discuss as a faculty. If it's a K to 12 meeting, it probably goes for an hour, but honestly, I think I've attended 2 of those in the last 12 months.
Yeah. Amazing.
And I really do find that the standard of communication is the same. It's not like the school where we had meetings all the time, the communication wasn't any better than where I am now when we have less meetings. But the things that need to be communicated are communicated clearly in a particular type of email that comes in a slightly different format to everything else. So it's like very clear. You can print it off as a PDF if you like, it's sent with a PDF attachment with all the kind of key ideas in bold and stuff like that.
I love that.
So I just think that is a far better use of teacher time and teacher resources. And I would never complain about getting one of those emails over having to attend a meeting.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp. Yes. And my school is very much the same in that we have devotions Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. It's about 10 minutes. If there are any announcements that the entire school needs to hear, they'll happen then. And we have Wednesday afternoons for what's technically a whole staff meeting, but actually it's for grade collaboration where we write our programs.
There was another interesting article really, really recently from only like 2 weeks ago, put out by the Education Review about how it is now an official workplace law that employees have a right to disconnect. This phrase, right to disconnect, if you haven't heard before is in relation to the fact that technology is making it harder for us to draw the line between home and work. And it's suggesting that as employees, we have a right to refuse contact made by colleagues or parents or students and other people associated with our work. We have a right to refuse contact made by those people outside of our working hours. I was a bit bamboozled by this idea in the sense that I always would have assumed that I have a right to disconnect. And I was surprised that that needed to kind of be made law. Again, like Grace sort of said before, workplace culture and workplace expectations can vary from place to place, and maybe some work environments make it much harder for people to refuse that. But a lot of the time in the teaching world, it comes down to how we set our own boundaries in relation to how we are working at home and working at school. But it made me think about how I didn't have really tight email boundaries right from the start of my career, which led to some unfortunate emails that I responded to when, I probably should have just waited till the following school day. And so I set a rule that I wasn't going to look at emails over the weekend, just because I wanted to be able to switch off that part of my brain and not, I guess, worry that if I opened my inbox and saw a potentially stressful email, let's face it, most of the time, the content of emails is not stressful. But from time to time, you will get an email from a parent or from a supervisor that does potentially have a little bit more weight to it, and it can create a bit more stress and anxiety. And I just didn't want to be dealing with that without the support of my supervisors or other colleagues at work who could be guiding me in the right ways to respond or deal with certain emails that I might have received. So I had a no email on the weekend policy, and then one Sunday afternoon got a message from a group chat that I was in with some of my friends from work saying, "Oh, how crazy about tomorrow?" And I was like,
Huh?
What? What's happening tomorrow? Anyway, we had been sent an email saying, and this was like a bit after lockdown. So we were back at school face to face, but we had already done the whole school online kind of thing. We got an email saying, no students will be on site tomorrow due to a plumbing issue. Please transition all your lessons to Zoom.
On a Sunday afternoon.
On a Sunday afternoon. And I genuinely would not have known about it until I rocked up on Monday morning, had my friends in the group chat not have said something. Now, I think that falls under the category of
Emergency.
Emergency and right to disconnect. As an employer, they shouldn't assume that I will be looking at my emails outside of my work hours for something as serious as that. That required a massive change in my preparation for the following day I teach a practical subject. I don't always just have easy things that I'm teaching explicitly that I can just sort of, video myself. That required a big shift. And so I think for teachers, the right to disconnect, of course, you should not be made to feel like you have to respond to parents or staff outside of school time. But I think the right to disconnect law actually has more implications on employers.
Yes.
And higher ups at schools rather than on the employees, because they shouldn't be assuming that we will be accessing our emails outside of Monday to Friday.
Yeah. They have your mobile if they need to contact you as part of your staff details on file. If it's an emergency, call or text.
Well, I remember even mentioning it to the head of secondary, who was the one who sent the email, being like, hey, I wouldn't have even known about this if the others didn't tell me. And he was kind of like, oh, you probably should. I would always check my emails before I come back to school on Monday, or something like that. Just making me feel like the boundary that I had set in place was kind of dumb. Anyway, so I think this right to disconnect is not going to have a huge impact for a lot of teachers, but it might just be a necessary shift in making sure that other people aren't putting their email boundaries and expectations onto their employees.
We're living in the future. It is 2024. We are well into the future, guys. And I wear my Apple Watch to bed. I think it's probably a good thing that we have intentionally put the brakes on the encroachment of technology, because even though you do have the power to say no, it does also help to go, actually, let's make a conscious effort as a whole, as a collective, as a community, as a society, to just pause, because too much of a good thing, too much chocolate, and you're going to be thrown up. Like, I could live on chocolate, but I couldn't because my body would hate me for it. Same thing, which leads us to a discussion on boundaries, specifically in relation to emails and being contactable and all that sort of stuff. So I wanted to start with responding to emails, any emails. So at my school, we have a policy that says we have to at least reply to an email acknowledging that we've gotten it, basically a red receipt, in the first 24 hours. So we don't even have to have done anything by then. We just have to literally say, I've gotten your email. I am now thinking about it. Send. Within the first 24 hours, which is really helpful because, like, from both sides, because it means that it's a reasonable expectation on the recipient, but it also is respectful of the person who sent it, because they are aware that, hey, their email didn't just go into the ether and it's not just floating around, on the internet somewhere. Can you tell I know nothing about IT?
Is that 24 hours for you, like, non-inclusive of weekends? Like, if someone sends something to you on a Friday at midday, is your 24-hour period midday on the Monday?
Yes, I think it's like business days.
Yeah.
Yes. So I've got a full day to even worry about responding. And I'm a lot stricter when responding to parents than to colleagues, because I am really aware of maintaining that boundary of professionalism and also not setting a harmful precedent that if I send an email to my daughter's teacher or my son's teacher at 6 a.m., I'm going to get a response straight away. And I'm going to tell that to my parent friend, who is then going to start emailing their kid's teacher at all hours. I don't want to start that at all, especially because I'm early in my career. I just really want to be mindful about this thing in particular. So I'm a lot stricter about responding to parents, and I have actually used the schedule send feature. I got an email just about pickup arrangements, and I responded to it when I had the time the evening that I got it. I was at home, then I just scheduled it to send, I think, at 8 a.m. the next day, which is when I technically, quote unquote, start work. But yeah.
On the back of schedule send, if you haven't actually used that feature, it is, I think, an incredible tool that allows us to maintain appropriate relationships and maintain, or at least appear to be maintaining, appropriate boundaries without impeding on your ability to be flexible in when and how you work. So, for example, we know that this idea of work extension and having emails on our phones and all these things that make it really easy and flexible for us to work has created this kind of always on culture of working. And I think that that's not just within teaching, that's within the workforce more broadly. But that does make it hard, and it blurs the lines between, when do I switch off and when am I finished work, and do I do those things only at school or only at home? But in the same token, teachers want autonomy and flexibility. And so for some, being able to go home at contract time and then later in the evening do some of their admin, maybe after they've fed their kids and put their kids to bed, or maybe after they've had their own decompression time and gone to the gym and whatever else that you like to do in the afternoons, and then you kind of feel reset and maybe ready to do some admin work. We want that for you. We want you to be able to do what works in your environment and for your routine. So schedule send is the way that you can write your emails and read your emails at the time that suits you and reply to them without perhaps showing that you're working outside of typical work hours, which I think is more important for parents and students. And it shows your colleagues that you're respecting their email boundaries as well. So you may not know how comfortable your colleagues are with receiving emails at 11:59. I think a lot of people might see that and be bothered, or they might actually see it and be concerned about you and why you're up that late working. You might be a night owl and love working late. And go you, if that's the case. I feel like I struggle to stay awake past 8 p.m. But, you know, we all have different things. I think it's respectful of other people's boundaries if we send and receive emails between sort of 8 and 3-ish, or even say 7 in the morning, because by that time a lot of people are at least on their way to work. And it just really limits the martyrdom of people who are staying up late, working really hard, and the frustration of receiving an email late. And even if you didn't intend for someone to reply to it at the time that you sent it, it can be received like that. It can feel like to the person on the other end that, oh my goodness, they're wanting me to be thinking about that this late as well, and I'm not.
Yes, and like with my grade leader, if they don't explicitly tell you, don't respond if it's outside of work hours, I would assume, oh my goodness, you're working, I should be working, like you're technically my quote unquote boss. Like, is this the standard?
Yeah.
And if your leader isn't of mind enough to explicitly state that to you, then of course you're going to be worried. And yeah, it's just you're being respectful to yourself and to your colleagues if you just maintain those work boundaries.
Yeah. So if you don't know how to do it, it's pretty much the same in Outlook and Gmail. I'm not sure if schools use other sort of email platforms other than that, but they're the two that I've used. And pretty much when you're sending an email, in most cases where the send button is, there's like the little drop down arrow next to it. And instead of hitting the big send button, you hit the little drop down arrow and then it lets you choose a time. And I just think that is so helpful. I will especially do this if I am responding to a student because I don't want to be emailing kids late at night. That's weird. But also in relation to responding to students, I will just not answer them at all if I'm going to be seeing them face-to-face within that 24-hour period.
Yeah.
So if I get an email from a student asking a question about their assessment task and it's come through at 7 o'clock at night, I'm not going to reply to that anyway, and I see them period 2 the next day, well, I'm not going to spend time drafting an email explaining the answer to the question when I know that I'll see them at, 9 or 10 o'clock and I can just give them a verbal explanation and actually gauge whether they've understood it as well. So I'm a bit more picky in whether I respond to student emails at all. I will, of course, reply to a student if they've emailed me because they've been sick for the week and they're asking, what can they catch up on, or there's other reasons why I would reply. But just an email that's asking a question about a task, if I know I'm going to see that student within a 24-hour period, I will usually just either ignore it and say to them in class, hey, I got your email. Let's make sure that we catch up about that today, if it's not appropriate to do that right at the start of the lesson. Or I'll email them back and just say, hey, I'll chat to you about this in class.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting just thinking about high school students that you're dealing with emailing you. When I was in high school, 7 o'clock was my prime working time. But because my mother has been a teacher for longer than I've been alive, she was very aware and said to me, Grace, you know that teachers are human beings, right? And that you can't email your teacher at 7 o'clock at night because they'll be like having dinner with their family. And I was like, what? Yeah. And I think we could do a whole episode on teaching email etiquette to teenagers because the way that they email is hilarious because they treat it like a text message. And it's like, asking your teacher, saying to your teacher, I hope this email finds you well. It's not just a meme. You might want to say that. But I am a I'm a grammar Nazi, and this is a complete tangent, but I'm the type of psychopath who will put full stops at the end of their text messages because that's grammatically correct. And so I cannot fathom anything else, like not using capital letters for proper nouns. If you're going to address me by name, capitalize it, even if it's in a text message. My mother and I have lots of animated conversations because she is terrible at, she just couldn't be bothered to read, proofread her messages, and will often say, please don't judge me for the typos, even though it makes her messages completely unreadable. And she knows this.
A book that I read recently called Stolen Focus was by an investigative journalist called Johann Hari. And he talked about all sorts of fascinating things, but with a particular focus on basically how the evolution of technology and our kind of instant gratification that we get from it has really had a serious impact on our ability to focus on tasks. I think we see this really easily in our students, and we perhaps struggle to see it more easily in ourselves. Basically, part of the research and experimenting that he did on himself as he was writing the book was essentially weaning himself off his technology and rebuilding his stamina for reading. He found that he, used to be able to read books in really long sittings, and in more recent years was really struggling to read for extended periods. He was struggling to go on a walk without having a podcast or music in and those sorts of things. So he basically went through this phase of, as he was researching and writing the book, also trying to regain his stolen focus. And he worked back up to a period where he could go for a walk and just enjoy the quiet. And he could read for an extended period of time. And one of the things that he mentioned, so many things, a really good book. It's on Audible if you prefer to listen, which is what I did. But he talked about the notification. His big suggestion was, particularly with your emails, and this is hard because we know that when someone wants to notify us of something, they send us an email. But he basically says to leave your email tab open all day is just an ongoing source of distraction. And I think you even mentioned earlier that even if you're not getting emails, you can find yourself going back and checking for them.
Yes, even though the notification would appear on the little icon in my taskbar, so I'm still like, do I have an email? Do I have an email? And it doesn't matter. Even if it's open, I'm still thinking about it. If it's closed, I subconsciously have closed that tab.
Yes. I love the the quotes that say I've got too many tabs open in my brain. That's 100% how my brain works. But when we close our email tab physically, we are closing the email tab in our brain and training our brain that we're not going to think about emails until we reach the designated time period that we've allotted for emails. So for me, I would usually first read my emails early in the morning. Sometimes I do that in my car when I'm kind of too tired to get out of the car, but I've parked.
Yep.
And I just need a few moments of stillness.
Yep.
Sometimes I'll read my emails in the car and just glance over them and kind of know, is there something important that I need to deal with before I'm teaching period 1? Yes, no, react appropriately. Closing that tab does really help. And I've often found that when I've gone back to open that tab, say at the end of the day or maybe lunchtime, I might open it again and do another sort of check. Has anything essential come through? Yes, no, close the tab, deal with it later. I think here is where we can redraw on that 2-minute rule that we talked about last week. The 2-minute rule in relation to if a task can be done in 2 minutes, just do it now. So, for example, I got a couple of emails today that I was almost going to write down on my planning matrix, urgent, not important, or whatever. But then I thought it will actually take me 60 seconds to just respond to this email. So it doesn't even go on the to-do list because it's a task that can be done in less than 2 minutes. So I'm just going to do it now. Respond, done, close the tab. For emails that require a little bit more complex thinking, like today, I also got another email about a student in my class who was having a follow-up IEP meeting, and the person that was running that meeting was asking for some feedback from teachers on how that student was going. That I knew was something that I was going to need to stop and allocate some real thought and time to. And so that went on my list to be dealt with sort of at the end of the day when I had some time and brain space to actually offer to that because I wanted to do it properly. But yeah, closing the tab really does switch off that sort of always running in the background part of our thinking that can be really draining if you're constantly wondering if people are trying to get in contact with you. And sometimes I've gone to open my email tab, say at lunchtime, and I've noticed that someone from admin sent me an email asking a student from my class to go up to the office and pick up their diary or pick up their lunch or something. And maybe I didn't see it. And it's a little bit unfortunate. But also, they usually just work it out. Yeah. Usually the kid gets the email as well as me. So if I don't see it, the kid also gets it if it's an admin email like that. And pretty much that's the only time I've received an email where it was in class and it kind of needed to be actioned straight away. And it wasn't detrimental that I didn't see it.
And if it was an emergency, they would call you on your mobile, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have my mobile with me pretty much everywhere. My phone actually is my key to get into a lot of my classrooms. So I have it with me, usually sits on my front desk or in my pocket. And yeah, if they really needed to call me, someone would. And sometimes I have to call someone, like for IT support.
Yep.
But yeah, close your email tab, decide on the times that are going to work for you to read and respond to emails, and then don't leave it open during the day. And if you've got push notifications that come onto your computer, even when your tab is closed, I would turn them off.
Get rid of them.
Because you are going to be switching between tasks. You're in the middle of teaching. Oh, I've got this notification. Is that important? No, back to teaching. You are wasting energy and making it harder for your brain the more that you switch between those kinds of things.
Just to close, we've done a lot of, talking about emails, but the school that I currently work at uses Microsoft Teams not instead of, but in concert with emails. And basically, if you have never used Microsoft Teams before, it's kind of like Facebook, but for work. Just like Seesaw is Facebook, but for your class, Microsoft Teams is Facebook, but for work, because you can send like an announcement as a post to a channel. They split your contacts into channels. So you could have like a junior school channel or a senior school channel or a HISI faculty channel, or you can send like a announcement out to everyone. You can also direct message people, just like on Facebook Messenger, which is really what we use Microsoft Teams for at my school. And I think actually because of Microsoft Teams and the way we use it, I now think that if something is being emailed to me, it carries a little bit more weight purely because it's not as casual as a quick message on Teams. And I have like a little chat with my kindergarten colleagues, and we can send each other files and stuff. So we've got like a bank of resources that we've been sharing, like PDFs and stuff that we can send through. I just find that a lot easier because for me, the way that I personally view Teams, it kind of prioritizes things automatically. Because like, for example, when my principal sends the weekly kind of summary on a Sunday afternoon/evening, that's more official. So it's an email. And it often has some important information. If it's just a reminder, if it's like, hey, it's Sierra's birthday today, come down to the staff room at recess if you're not on duty and we'll do cake. Like that's super chill, if you will. And it's just a message. And I think that works really well. I personally am a fan. I like the fact that you can just send a quick message because for me, like it also means you don't have to say, Dear Sierra, hope this email finds you well. I have a quick question, blah, blah, blah. Kind regards, Grace. Like, it's just not as formal. Like, I find that emails, it is electronic mail. Like, when you send a letter, I mean, I did once upon a time send a physical letter that I handwrote. I think my cousin was my pen pal. I don't know why I'm pen pal. That's very sweet. But, like, that's more formal than the way we send quick texts now. Like, and I like that. I like that not everything has to be an email and you can kind of be a little bit more selective, I guess. And you can also, so handy, react with emojis if you've seen a text. I give it a thumbs up so that the sender knows
you've acknowledged it.
I have acknowledged it. I don't have to send an email. I just personally think it works really well. And I think it's, at the moment, an effective use of both email and kind of instant messaging.
Yeah, I think that's cool. And I guess we know that not everyone who's listening has the power to go to their school and say, hey, we're going to use Teams now or something like that. But it is helpful to consider what other alternative options are there to help to alleviate or just reduce the email workload. maybe you do just create some WhatsApp groups with your grade partners or with your faculty groups just to streamline some communication, make it a bit easier and less reliant on email. Somehow it just seems to be easier for our brains to manage instant messaging.
Yeah.
And I think the reduced formality, like I know for me, when I'm replying to an email, like I said earlier, one of my grade partners is on exec. I just feel like everything I reply has to be really formal, even though if he had have sent me that question as a text, I probably would have just thumbs upped it. It's just a bit funny how the formality of email can sometimes create that extra workload.
And you feel like you always have to have a signature, like kind regards or yours sincerely or forever yours.
Maybe not, but that does bring us to the end of our episode. We hope that you have found some of these strategies helpful, and we just want to encourage you to be really confident in setting your email boundaries and doing what works for you. But please use Schedule Send.
Also, please check out our Instagram, which is at Teaching Together the podcast. Make sure you also hit follow on the podcast so you don't miss all of our wonderful episodes. And check out our link tree, which is linked in our Instagram bio, because that is where you will find our Eisenhower Matrix freebie. And if you love us, please leave a 5-star review.
Yours sincerely, Sierra and Grace.